CAVA IPO June 15th, 2023. Tempus AI IPO June 14th, 2024. CAVA's first earnings report was a revenue of 175 million. Tempus AI's first earnings report was revenue of 166 million. So is Tempus AI the CAVA of AI stocks? That's kind of how I want to put it out there to start. So what they do, obviously small cap company, very similar to when CAVA first IPO'd, they do AI enabled diagnostics. So when I first saw Tempus AI, I didn't even look at it. I just wrote it off immediately because I thought, oh, this is some little fake AI company. Like we've got these little AI companies like SoundHound AI. We've got something called Bear or Big Bear AI, something like that. So we have C3 AI, which actually I would like to look at some point. But we have some companies that have put AI after their name, and I generally don't pay any attention to them whatsoever, especially if they IPO'd recently in the last couple of years, because I assume that it's some kind of play on AI that's not really going anywhere. But what I noticed with Tempus AI was that the stock wasn't going down. So it's IPO'd and had an immediate 22% drop, and then it's been pretty much up only since then. And when the analysts first released their coverage on Tempus AI, all of them rated it as a buy. So after its 22% drop, 8 firms came out and all rated Tempus AI as a buy. So these things kind of got my attention. I said, well, maybe this is worth looking at. And when I dug a little bit deeper, what I learned is that Tempus AI is actually already a highly established company in the biomedical field. So they do AI-enabled diagnostics. And I would like to play you a really quick clip where there's a host on CNBC who asks, what does Tempus AI do? So I want to just play that for you right now because I feel like this guy actually described it better than I possibly could.
What does Tempus AI do?
So Tempus AI is a differentiated kind of oncology diagnostics company. So they have 2 main businesses. The first of which is they do diagnostic testing on cancer patients. They're among a handful of companies that will test for metastatic cancer patients using next generation sequencing. They look at DNA and RNA across a big panel of kind of proven markers, and they try to match patients that have certain mutations to either approved therapies or clinical trial therapies. This type of testing has been going on for about 10 years or so, and Tempus is amongst 3 or 4 large what we call CLIA labs that are in this market. And there's also hospitals across America also do this on their own. So that's their really main business, and that's kind of the engine of how the company was started.
I'm going to stop it there, but I want to just add a couple things to what he said, and then we'll get your reaction because you probably know more about this than I do. But first of all, they're the largest sequencer of cancer patients by a large margin. Okay, by the time they IPO'd, they're already the largest sequencer of cancer patients in America by a large margin. They're also one of the largest liquid biopsy sequencers in the US, and they've been around for 8 years. This isn't a company that just came out a couple years ago. Now, they IPO'd a couple months ago, but they've been around for 8 years, and they're already a leader in the medical testing field. So, Kai, before we go any further, and I have some other things I'd like to say about, especially on the data front, and why I think they're an impressive AI data play. What do you think about their business? Can you give a little more insight on what specifically they do? Because the layperson doesn't understand anything about sequencing or biopsy, or maybe they heard grandpa had a biopsy on his skin or something, but they don't know what this is all about. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is this stuff about?
Well, sometimes in particular cancers, you want to find out some sort of genetic sequence that may be able to target your therapy for that particular type of cancer. Also, sometimes we can use these things for early detection, and also into risk factors for cancer, malignancy, potentially help with detection. And so if that gives you an idea. So for example, if James, you were diagnosed with a tumor or cancer and it was removed and you needed some sort of therapy afterwards, that there may be some sort of genetic testing on the particular type of, or on the tumor to determine what particular type of therapy may be best to treat you. Now, there are certain cancers that we do this with, as far as, I don't know about with Tempus AI's technology, but as far as genetic testing of the tumor itself, there are some tumors that we already do this with. But beyond the point of all of that, the one issue I have with Tempus AI currently is the evaluation and basically what it's trading at. But just from a possibility standpoint, also in the way something like that may work, one of the things that we're doing well is being able to determine how tumors behave, for example. However, one of the things that's not been done real well is being able to find treatments, and or even if you were able to say, okay, this particular tumor has this particular genetics, we only have so many therapies that are for example, cancer. There's only so many drugs out there. Does that make sense? We haven't developed potentially a lot of new methods of chemotherapy. We have chemotherapy and radiation and hormonal therapy, but there's not lots of other options. And so I don't think that part of the technology is drastically increasing. And so I'm not for sure, and I'm speaking really how this is going to help in certain ways, potentially. So there's some unknowns there, is what I'm going to say, where this will go.
Well, Tempus AI says that they've got 10,000 oncologists already regularly ordering their tests, and there's only 14,000 oncologists in the US. So they've got 2,400 hospitals in the US feeding them data. There's only 5,500 hospitals in the US. So they're already over 50% penetration on oncologists, and they're already at 50% penetration on total US hospitals. So it sounds like you're a bit of a Debbie Downer kind of on their adoption, but they make it sound like they're already massively adopted. So they say sequencing has been growing 25% per year, and they've been growing even quicker than that. So I don't know, man. Just give me I guess what I would say, sum it up for me. Do you think that the kind of sequencing they do for targeted chemotherapy drugs, I think is what you're saying, is that going to keep growing? Is it going to be a big thing, or is it not going to be a big thing?
I don't know ins and outs of the businesses and as far as these sort of the genetic testing company goes. I don't know the ins, but I know pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money. And one of the things that goes with pharmaceutical companies, especially while the drug is not generic, the company will make a lot of money. And so I'm saying that even though they can do the testing, I'm not for sure that we have the targeted therapies yet to be able to make the testing worth it. So therefore, what's going to be the appetite for paying for the tests? It sounds like Tempus AI is being able to utilize a lot of this genetic testing to then be able to develop better testing, and using AI to develop better testing. So I don't know.
Let me play one more clip for you, because I think when you get in one way or another, there is a huge amount of demand based on what they're saying for their products. And let me play one clip for you where he kind of talks about their data and what they do. I think this might clear things up a little bit on one front.
But you have to give us clinical data for your patients, because we can't marry these things and help you make data-driven decisions without the clinical data. So we'd walk in and we'd say to people like, hey, we're going to sequence your patients, but oh, by the way, you have to give us all the data. And we need to keep a copy of it and be unrestricted, because we have to figure out how to use the data. And it's really expensive to mess with the data. So we have to at some point make money, or we're not sustainable. And that was a really hard message originally. But there was definitely an inflection point where enough hospitals had said yes that it became really easy for the next hospital to say yes. But I can't remember when that was, and certainly...
All right, so I'll stop it there. So at this point, as far as data is concerned on their patients, they have 250 million gigabytes of data, and it grows by 20 million gigabytes a month. So they have an enormous amount of proprietary data. And what we've learned with AI over the past year or two is that proprietary data is pretty much the most valuable thing in AI. So OpenAI is paying publishers to use their articles and their data and things like that. It's not really making a model. It looks like almost any big company can make a model. Any hyperscaler can train a model. So it's not really the model that's the most valuable thing, especially considering we have open source models now. It's really proprietary data. And Tempus AI is a massive owner of human data, biological data on people. I think that data will only be more valuable in the future. The concern that you brought up, you said, well, look at their valuation. This is a CAVA. I mean, when CAVA came out, obviously their valuation is still pretty crazy. But when you have a small cap company come out like this, they're going to be losing money. if they were already massively profitable, they'd probably already be public, but they're not. So in this case, they see profitability coming in 2025. We're not there yet. We don't know what's going to happen. But for small caps, I mean, would you have liked to get in on CAVA before it went up well over 100%, 200%?
I can understand selling Mediterranean food and looking at the numbers to decide whether a company's profitable, looking at their EBITDA and their EPS and their revenue. I don't know entirely where Tempus AI fits in the medical healthcare picture. Basically, what he's saying there is in order for them to be able to sequence and even come up with new tests, they need the data first, right? And there's a whole bunch of challenges in regards to getting basically every pathological diagnosis that then has to be able to send those slides or send the tissue to this company for them to be able to run genetic testing on. And then so they do the genetic testing on these tumors, and then what do they do from there? They say, oh, well, this tumor has this sequence and the studies and basically the data collection that may be able to come into that to then be able to develop a test to be able to sell it. I think what I like to see is then, okay, you develop a drug and then sell that, because a company like Eli Lilly, that's a whole different story because they're basically selling drugs. I can understand, oh, I'm selling James a treatment or a drug for you to take to help with whatever issue you have. And then that cost money. Basically, they're going to sell testing to these hospitals somehow or come up with a test. I don't see the product here yet.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that because your metaphor of a company that develops a drug, well, it just so happens a lot of very small drug developers wind up getting acquired if they actually have success with the drug that they're engineering. Apparently, the process of getting it fully approved through the FDA is very expensive. So a lot of time they get acquired before they even get there. So maybe this company gets acquired. Maybe Tempus AI winds up getting acquired just for their data or something like that.
Maybe. But I could invent, drugs. You sometimes have to have hundreds and hundreds of drugs trials for you to go through until you find one that's profitable, and you lost money on all these drugs that you didn't make through to phase 3 trials. And then you come up with your drug that's actually profitable. I don't know if the margins are there or the revenue can be there for testing. And that's my point. I think I like the idea of the data collection. Is it worth something that's not basically has zero EPS, a revenue growth from 150,000 to 500,000, basically, without any, that's not basically profitable. I mean, they're negative EBITDA. So to justify an evaluation in the 50s, no, I'm not paying. I am currently not a buyer of Tempus AI because their evaluation is too high based on what I've seen. Now, this is a company is on my watch list for sure.
All right. I am not buying Tempus AI, although they have an extremely impressive database of AI human data that they can use in the future. And they're already a well-established cancer testing company, but at a price around 50, it's just too high. I'd buy if it was around 30, though.